Robin Gagnon.
And I'm Eric Gagnon, and we sell restaurants. We started the nation's largest restaurant brokerage firm, We Sell Restaurants, over a decade ago. You can find us online at WeSellRestaurants.com.
We are on the air once a week with our expert guests talking about those topics that are trending in the restaurant business. Tweet your own questions while we're on the air to our Twitter handle, Sell Restaurants, or post on our Facebook page, facebook.com/WeSellRestaurants. If we don't get to your question, we'll follow up on social media this week.
Our goal is to satisfy your appetite for acquisition, feed the need for restaurant reality, and serve up a recipe for business success. We go out into the restaurant industry to assemble the top authorities on topics trending in this fast-paced world filled with both risk and success to share the inside scoop.
We're joined today by some leading authorities who are going to talk about their knowledge on food technology. Today is a really interesting topic. We're going to explore that intersection of technology and the restaurant industry, the point where high-tech meets personal service. Topics include the latest devices to assist the food service operator, the latest mobile, web, or other technologies that a restaurant owner should be aware of, and the top mobile platforms used for restaurant search. Joining us today are two guests from Foodie Geek TV and Digital Coco. Our first guest is Paul Barron. Paul is known as the go-to guy in digital, social, and media for the restaurant and hospitality industries. He is the co-founder of Digital Coco, one of his 6 companies in media and technology launched over the past few decades. Paul, your picture doesn't look old enough for that. Web entrepreneur, publisher, and producer, Paul has been instrumental in developing and publishing platforms, creative content, tech solutions, and web audience for global brands with real impact and results. As the founder of FastCasual.com and QSRWeb.com, he has been a catalyst for both the retail and restaurant industries and is known as the father of the fast casual segment. Paul is a sought-after public speaker and consultant to many top local brands in the business. He was a 2012 Forbes Top 15 Social Power Influencers, Restaurant Trendsetter of the Year 2012, host of Fast Casual Nation, a new global documentary, and considered one of the best data scientists in retail and food. His passion for the restaurant business has been mastered over the past 20 years with more than 500 brands. Paul, we are so excited to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Good. And also, not least, we're also joined today by Jessica Bryan. Jessica Bryan is the editor at Foodable and senior digital brand analyst for digital brand agency Digital Coco. She frequently gives her millennial insight to industry research platform, including the National Restaurant Association. Jessica hosted the first season of Foodie Geek TV, a web TV channel geared towards the emergence of both food and technology for pro foodies and industry insiders. Jessica, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Thanks for having us.
Okay, well, let's kick this off with Paul. Since you're known as the go-to guy for digital and social media in the restaurant industry, give us your opinion. How has social media really changed or impacted this industry? Because one thing that frequently comes up as we're talking to sellers and we go and view their online reputation is, does a smartphone and internet qualify someone as a restaurant critic? Because there are a lot of those out there.
Sure, that's a pretty typical question. But as far as impact on the industry, I think social in general has really just elevated the awareness of today's restaurant consumers, not only in being able to search out and find information about restaurants, but also be able to collaborate with other restaurant goers about the quality or the service or just a variety of aspects. It used to be the water cooler and kind of that Monday morning discussion of what you had over the weekend, but now today with social, it really has created a real-time environment for the restaurant business, and it's both good and bad. It's got great. Obviously, I think from an industry pundit standpoint, I think it's probably on the upside for the industry, but of course there are times when it can be detrimental to an operation as well.
Right.
Good. Hey, Jessica, from a brand analyst perspective, would you consider Chipotle the leader in the fast casual restaurants and companies? Back to the Start campaign, take the idea of fresh farm food, incorporating pop culture, animation, gaming. They are doing a huge campaign about this. Does the company need to incorporate these elements in order to appeal to the millennials?
Yeah, so these days millennials really want to be part of a brand. So that's why interactive things like gamification are so popular. People don't want to be on the sidelines anymore. They want to be part of it. And I think social media has really leveraged that opportunity for millennials.
Now, when you say gamification here, I think some of our listeners probably are new to that word, especially associated with restaurants. Can you elaborate a little bit about their strategy and what they're trying to do and what millennials are looking for from that word?
Yeah, absolutely. So gamification is, perhaps on a restaurant operator's app, it's just different features that allow, consumers to be interactive, whether it's a game. You may have heard of Angry Birds.
Yes.
Is a good example. That was a popular gamification app. Stuff like that where people can really get involved and, kind of veer towards a more lifestyle aspect of the brand rather than just the product aspect of the brand.
See, I think that's very interesting, the word you used about interacting, because restaurant consumers are no longer passive. They are really going all in for the experience. And Paul, in doing that, they're obviously using mobile platforms to do it. What are the top mobile platforms used for restaurant searches?
When mobile is, right now it's really kind of following the primary technology of the industry as a whole. When you look at Android and iPhone as obviously the two major leaders. One thing though that is interesting, because a lot of times we get that question from restaurant operators if they're looking, one, to develop an app, or a web app. There's two different scenarios there. When you look at web apps versus say general apps, which reside in like an ecosystem like the iPhone or in your Android Galaxy S4, those are two different ecosystems. But what's very unique about the restaurant industry is we believe that there's actually, even though Android is the number one platform in terms of mobile use for restaurants, the affluency level of iPhone carriers really have a much better target audience for a restaurant operator, especially in upscale casual or fine dining, and even in fast casual to a certain extent. So that helps you isolate in on your target audience, much like when you're trying to do a mail drop to a specific demographic in the city or area that you're in. You're going after affluent customers who do have expendable income. And with mobile, it's no different. You're really trying to find and target those users who can afford to eat out. So with Android being the leader, iPhone I think still is, though they're just a hair behind them in terms of deployed user groups, it still is probably the number one platform for a restaurant operator to reach out on, whether it's app-based or the type of things that you're doing in your restaurant around the iPhone ecosystem itself.
See, that is such an interesting way to look at it. As restaurant brokers, it's always been location, location, location for our customers. So when they are looking to put themselves into a new market or expand their brand within a market, they're coming to us and asking about the demographics. But you're actually exploding that out into a very different way to consider the demographic base of the customer you're going to attract, and they may come farther or not even be in that trade area if in fact they become brand loyal because they're that millennial who's engaged some way or another, and also because they have access to an app on their iPhone that gets them excited about that brand.
Absolutely. And there's so many apps out there for the food industry right now. It's probably one of the most top deployed app areas in terms of categories in the ecosystem outside of mapping and social media products.
That's a good point you're bringing here, Paul. And Jessica, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. We see a lot of apps coming out from Chipotle's and the big brands and the franchise companies and everything. But how difficult or how emerging it is for independent and smaller people to try to get in market share of that outside your brick and mortar walls to get attention from the consumers on an ongoing basis.
Right, that's a good question. So, I think the consumer base going to a brand's app really stems from their actual experience in the brick and mortar restaurant. And I think just taking that relationship further outside of the restaurant will really strengthen that with their consumer base. So I think it's more or less not really expanding that base, but strengthening it.
That's a very good point. So you're saying that this all app kind of based products and everything is just to strengthen your relationship with your current consumers. So people out there, restaurateurs, wannabes, or people in the business should not expect to gain new customers from these applications.
I think that it has the ability to if it has enough of a range, say like a Starbucks or a Chipotle, a big brand. But if it's a a one unit independent operator, I think that is true.
So we've come a long way from the old loyalty punch card of visit 5 times and you get a free dessert.
Absolutely. They actually have apps now that cater just to loyalty programs. So that's really interesting.
So do the restaurants today need the technology in order to stay relevant with their customer base? Just
I would say absolutely. That's such a huge issue with a lot of operators is thinking that 5 years ago the industry was fairly lax in adopting new technology, but today that's not even an option any longer. Just the amount of technology being used by consumers is it's too rampant to ignore anymore. 5 years ago the smartphone really did not have the coverage it does now in the U.S. obviously, and because of that, just that alone, it's pretty much changed the entire ecosystem of how how the restaurant business is going to deal with technology.
And I forgot the statistic, but I actually read a statistic not too long ago about exactly when it is that folks accessing the web will overcome any desktop or laptop platforms and will all be on mobile devices. But it's in the very near future that web access will actually be primarily coming through mobile devices rather than what we would have considered to be the traditional ways to access the web. So Eric, you want to pitch in and ask one other question about the mobile platforms?
Yeah, I'd like to take this, guys. We've been flying high here for a few minutes, and now that we kind of know each other a little bit more, let's dive right in, okay? We talk about apps, we talk about it in general, but if I'm a restaurant owner, a franchisee, independent, or anything like that, I'm getting bombarded every day from email marketing companies, social media companies, web-based companies, and all this stuff, and it could take me 65 hours a week just to manage that or to do that. And also, if according to their claim, I'll have to expand my restaurant from 1,500 square feet to 2,500 square feet because I'll have people lined up out the door. And we all know that once you write the check, a lot of time it doesn't happen. So get us an overview of what you would see a good startup, social-based, web-based strategy, media strategy for a restaurant.
Well, obviously it depends on the type and style of restaurant, but let's assume that it's an independent operator that's in a major metropolitan area that has a good retail location.
Okay.
So let's assume those are the factors. The very minimum that they're going to need to do is immediately get a social presence on at least the 3 majors in social, which are Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. If they want to expand it a little further, I would go ahead and consider an Instagram account. Vine would be a little edgy for a startup. But social-wise, that's the very least they should be doing. And then it's really just a matter of allocating a little bit of time each week, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time to social. It's not like you have to cover a ridiculous amount of content, so it's not a tough thing to do. But the other thing too, from a non-social standpoint, is the web side, which is where responsive website design comes into play. That's absolutely a must today. Responsive meaning that a mobile user or a desktop user has somewhat the same experience, and make sure not to use a flash-based player, or at least something that a iPhone or tablet can't get to. That's always frustrating for a consumer. Those are just simple tips that really every restaurant operator out there should be employing today.
That's great. Now, let me again kind of keeping this on that more detailed level. Tell me, what is it that customers are searching about on a restaurant? Are they looking for the menu? Are they looking to make reservations? Are they going for sanitation scores? What's the main source of information they're trying to get when they go to look up a restaurant?
So the primary thing that consumers are searching for via their smartphone is, the restaurant's menu. People want choices. They have so many of them. They want to narrow it down before they even step into the establishment. Another thing that they look for, restaurant locations, as well as reviews. And, Twitter is a huge platform for searching for restaurants as well.
And is this all across the board? Millennials, baby boomers, Gen X? Is everybody kind of looking for the same thing, or each demographic has different kind of criteria for searching?
Every demo is actually kind of unique. They have different digital habits that they employ for a restaurant. The boomer, which is a little bit more affluent, though they have and are growing in smartphone usage, the type of restaurants that they're searching for is different. They've got a little bit more expendable income. In some cases, they might have a little bit more time. So that changes the overall experience. Versus if you look at the millennial, which is almost all mobile use, they're really going after frequency. So they'll eat out a little bit more often and maybe spend a little bit less money and look for a better experience, which is why they're perfect for fast casual.
That's good information. And I actually heard this term, I believe, through some of your publishing, the mobile millennial. Is that how you describe the generation that's so plugged into their mobile device for use? And how big is their impact to the restaurant industry?
Yeah, so actually, the market share for, coming from millennials is huge. We are, first of all, millennials, we base it on those born between 1982 and 1998. So it's one of the largest, bases of the market right now. So we have so much power, so much influence that operators are really listening to what we want. Actually, from 2011 to 2012 alone, the mobile usage for millennials interacting with restaurants rose 31%, making it over half of millennials using their cell phones to access restaurants.
That is.
So, and just imagine how much that's grown in the past year itself.
Yeah, that is really an amazing statistic. And so obviously their impact to the industry is huge.
Paul, question for you. You got a lot of restaurants that have been around for 30, 40, 45 years, 50 years, and they've worked them out. Generational, is part of their DNA, I guess. From the grandfather to the father to the kids, been going there. They're doing very little social media, very little of anything. They're not plugged in. Their website probably is still circa 1992. They are not doing anything. They're still believing that, hey, our history will keep going forward, and we'll keep going. Our customer will still come. Do you believe millennials will just go because of that? Their father, their mother, their family told them to go, or you think these restaurants are going to become at risk of becoming extinct in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
I think that in general, the industry has to be able to model itself around what's happening in real time. Unfortunately, in the past 10 years, that has accelerated dramatically at a pace in which the industry itself is not really prepared for. That being said, millennials kind of have a mind of their own in reality. They're not a typical user of the industry as what we have seen out of the Gen X and the boomers. So a restaurant that might have a great word of mouth and history, though millennials will still try it because, and again, it would have to be something really unique that a millennial would go ahead and risk it to go out to where their mom and dad ate or where they went as a child. But what can happen for those restaurants is they can become more hip and cool, and in essence remake themselves into a product that the millennial might associate with differently. And the cool thing about that is the tool set that's available to restaurant industry operators today is actually so much more accessible than it was just 3 years ago. Social alone has pretty much put the independent restaurant operator back on the map. It gives the independent the same power as Chipotle or a Panera or a Four Seasons or a Del Frisco's. The ability to be able to communicate real time with audience is now in the hands of everyone. It's not just the affluent restaurant operators any longer. So I think that in itself is if they take the lead on this and use their expertise, older restaurants that have great word of mouth and great user base could actually come out huge winners if they shift into kind of this digital generation.
That's really interesting. So you're saying actually that the digital generation is sort of leveling the playing field for both for the small players against the bigger operators that may have more staffing, but they may not have as much creativity or energy. I have an interesting example. We had a gentleman who was a part of a franchise, and he put together a YouTube spot, and corporate called him and said, "You have to take that down. It doesn't fit our image, blah, 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 blah." He got so many hits and so much craziness about it. A day went by, and corporate said, "You didn't take that down." He said, "No, I'm getting so much good response." Another day went by, corporate called him and said, "Who produced it, and how can we get it to use it for the whole company?" So, those things happen. That energy and creativity is in the hands of that single owner, operator.
We're seeing a lot of changes like that. I mean, this is very interesting that you see this as more of a geo-specific targeting helps with the smaller operators being able to make inroads in their marketplace.
Yeah, you bet. Listen, geo and targeting, social alone has kind of reinvented the idea of what it means to reach the local audience. It's probably the power that an operator has today is absolutely unbelievable compared to what they
Hold that thought. We're coming against a hard break here for a commercial. Thank you for listening. This is the We Sell Restaurant Show with Eric and Robin Gagnon. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back after the break.